I'd like to welcome everyone for showing up tonight. I'm Jerry Curran. I'm taller than that. Chair of the New Hampshire Sierra Club. I'd like to thank you for being here, and our people on Facebook that are watching us on Facebook Live, whatever that is. I'd also like to thank the Pessamit Innu for coming down. The elders will be introduced to you shortly. I'd like to wonder, are there any people, any indigenous people for indigenous communities that would like to identify themselves? We'd be honored to know that if you feel comfortable.
There's Sagamukuliat right in front.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I'd like to take just a couple of minutes to talk about Northern Pass and the Sierra Club, New Hampshire Sierra Club's position on Northern Pass. Hydro Quebec flooded 8.7 million acres of boreal forest, pristine boreal forest in Quebec, to start this big process that would give us Northern Pass. That was 8.7 million acres of forest. That was a huge carbon sink. It's where we absorbed carbon. It's kind of like how the planet was breathing. They flooded it and covered it with water. Probably not a green way to bring energy to us. The other problem with it too, in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, we're all worried about that. If we might think, well, we know that that's a green source of power and it's carbon neutral. It's not. What happens is the material that gets flooded disintegrates and bubbles off methane. Methane is 87 times more reactive as a greenhouse gas than carbon is. So you've got this thing bubbling away, and throughout the years, it kind of never goes away because leaves and stuff, all that organic stuff just keeps flowing in there, and it just bubbles methane forever. So it actually is a lot more like a coal-fired power plant or maybe a gas-fired power plant. So in every way, it's a really bad deal. Now, bringing in 1,000 megawatts of power from Canada, that's power that we would have made that power here with wind and solar. And that is kind of carbon neutral. So for the next 60 years, we'll have to take in this power that we get from this reservoir system rather than producing our own power. Another really bad reason for doing that. The other thing that we'll do is the new industries here, like solar and wind, that are just getting started, if we've got this huge amount of power coming down from Canada, it kind of puts a cooling effect on that. Just another bad problem that we're having with Northern Pass and getting that power down here. We thought about this for a long time when it first started, and it took us a while to run through it because there's so much information that you get that tells us that it's green and that it's wonderful, and that we know that it really isn't. So we have a great, one last thing, but that's not going to be my part, and that is that it also moved a huge number of indigenous people, stole their land, moved them, ruined their indigenous life, and that's the point of this talk tonight. So I will introduce Louis Archambault, and he'll introduce everyone else. Louis?
Thank you very much. So, thank you very much, Mr. Curran. We are glad and honored to be here. I would like to present you the people who are there. All the people there except one, and I will present that person later, just after, are from the Pessamit Innu community. And right in the front, there's 3 elders, and my remark goes as well for the Canadian society as well as the American society. I do believe that our society doesn't, the value of the elders fade out in our society, which is not the case for the Native society. The elders are very, very important to them. That's the wisdom of their society. That's the memory of the society. The elders are very, very respected in the Native community, and for us it was important, and for Pessamit it was very important to have the elders here, and also due to the fact that these 3 gentlemen lived the forced migration imposed by Hydro Quebec. They were on the land with their family, making their living, and they were chased away from their territory. So they know a lot. From your left, first row, there's Monsieur St-Onge, which spent all born. They were all born in the forest, and they spent all their life till very recently in the forest. So Mr. St-Onge, in the middle, Mr. Hervieux, which also raised his family by trapping and hunting and so on. And there's Mr. Vachon, the next to your right. And I will go right away behind. There's Mr. Canapé to your the left. Mr. Canapé is an elected member of the Pessamit Innu Band Council. There's Mr. Hervieux in the middle, which is also an elected member of the Band Council, and as well as Deputy Chief. And there's Mr. Riverain at the far right, which is also an elected member of the Band Council. Unfortunately, the Chief Simon was not able to attend our journey for reason of health reason. So he would have appreciated to be here with you and with this delegation, but it was not possible. And the last but not the least, there's Chief Paul Pouliot, and I should say Sagamo Paul Pouliot from New Hampshire. We are working closely with his First Nation since a year or so. We do have very good relations, and here we are on its traditional territory. So for us, it was important to have Sagamo Pouliot in front with us. So let's go with the presentation. We'll try to see as well there. What does mean Nitassinan? Nitassinan, it's an Innu word, which means our land. By the way, these people, their first language is Innu Emun. That's their first language. When they speak together, they're only speaking their mother tongue. Their second language is French. And the reason why, I mean, Quebec was colonized at the beginning by France, and that's also the reason why I don't have a very good English. So from there, and how big is their traditional land? Their traditional land goes out. It's more than 53,000 square kilometers, and it goes from the St. Lawrence River to the 55th parallel, way up north. It's a huge territory, and the Innus they're living on that territory since 8,000 years. And a remark that might be interesting for you, the ancestors of Chief Pouliot are here roughly since 10,000 years. And what would be what is the reason why they were on the territory since 10,000 years, and the Innu since only 8,000 years? Glaciers, okay? So you could imagine that the glacier went away faster here than in northern Quebec. So that's the reason. And by the way, these people were here since 8 to 10,000 years, and roughly we are here since 350 years or so. So we're all here on this side, newcomers. So the Innus are nomads by necessity, and they were basically they were always traveling according to where was the food, and the native people like here, for instance, in the Massachusetts, and we met a lot of them yesterday. A lot of them were cultivating corn and many plants and so on. But up north there, so it was not possible. I mean, the season is too short, it's impossible. So basically, the Innu are nomad by necessity. There was no possibility to cultivate corn or whatever. So, first of all, Pessamit and Pessamit Innu, these are the people from Pessamit, okay? This is their name. And Pessamit is one of the 9 Innu community in Quebec. There's 9 Innu community in Quebec, roughly 20 to 21,000 people. And the Pessamit community is one of the second largest one with 4,000 people. I've already mentioned that Innu is their mother tongue. And later on, after the presentation, if you want to ask questions to these gentlemen, they know a lot. So basically, it will have to be translated from English to French and to Innu, and at least for the elders. But they know a lot, much more than me. The reservation is settled on the St. Lawrence River, north of Bécomo. I mean, Bécomo, it's a small town nearby. It's basically a town which is much bigger, Montreal, which is a good reference. It's 390 miles northeast from Montreal, and 620 miles northeast of Boston. So I would say, I don't know, 550 roughly from here. So it's a good ride. The point that I'd like to make with these pictures, these pictures have been taken just before the Pessamit Innu were chased away from their territory, and it did happen very quickly. Within 25 hours, Hydro Quebec chased them all out. So basically, the end of a way of life, and that's what it is. Till the whole thing began in 1952. Hydro Quebec did start to install some mega hydroelectric project on their territory. By the end, by 1978, which makes roughly a generation, Hydro Quebec have installed 13 huge power stations, mega power station, 11 reservoirs, and the size of these reservoirs are incredible, and we'll see that later. So basically, one thing which is very important to remember, the rivers were their highways. That was the only way to get to their territory. So when Hydro Quebec flooded everything, they lost everything, and I'll explain that further. So in the beginning of the 50s, the Quebec government, by the way, the Quebec government is the sole shareholder of Hydro Quebec. The sole shareholder of Hydro Quebec. And that means a lot, and you will see. So basically, by the beginning of the 50s, the government knew that the government was planning to set up a hydroelectric project on their traditional territory. So, and the government also knew that they were full-time on the territory, trapping, hunting, and so on, and making their living there for their family. And they were making a very good life. With that. They were not rich, but they were not poor. The fur up north, the quality of the fur, it's a very high-grade quality fur, and they were selling the furs and eating the animals that they were hunting and trapping and so on, and they were living happy. So basically, what to do to remove these people from the territory? The government knew that there was a project coming in, and so they decided to simply, for the family who were bringing the children on the territory, to cut the family allowance. There should be something similar in the United States, I guess. When you have so much kid, you could you receive family allowance for so much, and if you have one more kid, it's a little bit more, and so on. So by doing that to poor people, you could imagine the tremendous impact of that. And the only reason is that they want them to settle on the reservation, not to be in the way of Hydro Quebec. And that's why I made the point that the Quebec government is the sole shareholder of Hydro Quebec. So by 1952, the government and Hydro Quebec launched a lot of the mega projects on Pessamit Nitassinan, traditional territory, and Pessamit 1 and 2, Hardjome, Manik 1, 2, 3, 5, Utab 2, 3, 4, all completed in 1978. By the way, just to give you an idea of the magnitude of these hydroelectric complexes, you already know that Hydro-Quebec is a giant one. And I'm quite sure that that's the biggest producer of electricity in North America. 29% of the installed capacity of Hydro-Quebec is coming from their territory. 29%. Why did Pessamit didn't react before? They should have. Why didn't they react before? It was until 1973. It was strictly forbidden for First Nation to hire lawyers to defend their right in court. So if they were doing so, they were cutting the subsidies and so on. And there was no more money coming to the reservation. And you have to look at that in that way. When they were living on the territory, they didn't need the government. They were making their own living. When they told them to settle on the reservation, they told the man, "You're no good anymore to make the living of your family. We're going to send you a check." And the worst thing that could happen to a man is to pay him to do nothing. That if you want to kill a man, that's the best way to do it, to kill a man. So infringement of Pessamit rights by Hydro Quebec and the Quebec government. The Aboriginal rights to fish for food and for cultural purposes were recognized by the Supreme Court of Canada in 1990. So, and there was a nuance in the judgment of the Supreme Court of Canada. The Supreme Court of Canada said that infringement of Aboriginal rights could be justified if the least amount of harm is done, fair compensation is paid to the Aboriginal group. Neither Quebec or Hydro Quebec, they never did anything. You know what Pessamit had in compensation for 29% of the installed capacity of Hydro Quebec? Zero. So during that time, and back in 1973, the Supreme Court of Canada made a judgment saying that all the province have to recognize the treaty rights that have been signed by First Nation, as well as their historical rights. What are treaty rights? The Pessamit did sign 2 treaties. One with Samuel de Champlain, you know who's Champlain, Lake Champlain, that's the one. So back in, that was the first treaty with First Nation in North America. In 1603, they signed a treaty in the Innu. And what was the treaty? the treaty was giving the permission to the French to settle on the Innu territory. So the French were welcome on the Innu territory. It ended differently. And the second one, when England took over of the French, 1759, King George III signed the Royal Proclamation, and within the Royal Proclamation, it said that these land doesn't belong to England, it belongs to them. And so they were able to have their right respected till roughly 1850. After that, they were less powerful than the newcomers. And it seemed that the treaties were hidden somewhere. And for everyone, they didn't have any rights. So basically, the Supreme Court of Quebec said to all the province, the Supreme Court of Canada said to all the province, these people have rights, and you have to respect these rights. But the Quebec government, with its bad faith, fight that from 1973 to 1996. And they went in court, and finally the Supreme Court of Canada reversed their position and said, no, the people in First Nation in Quebec do have the same right as any other First Nation everywhere else in Canada. And what did they do? Why the Quebec government did behaves in such a way? Because during that time, it was giving the time for Hydro Quebec to invade their territory. And in 1996, everything was done, everything was finished. And so basically that was the reason. And actually, the Quebec government is demonstrating chronic reluctance to respect Pessamit rights. Recognized by the Supreme Court of Canada, recognized by the Canadian Constitution. By the way, I should make that point clear, we do have very good collaboration with the Canadian government, not with Quebec, not with Hydro Quebec. So that slide speaks by itself. And and you know, they recognize a lot of people that they know, the elders. So, as I've mentioned, Pessamit forced migration, so all their highways were blocked, flooded. There's trees floating all over the place. The water goes up and down. I mean, it's impossible to make any living there, and all the animals are fade out of that war environment. So there's 29% of Hydro Quebec installed capacity that was installed illegitimately, acquired to the detriment of Pessamit. Close to 3,200 square miles of hydroelectric reservoir on their traditional territory. So it was impossible to practice traditional activities anymore. That was the end of a way of life. Without, again, any kind of impact assessment study, any compensation, no consultation, no nothing. So, and the problem for these people, who were making their living by trapping and hunting. So, and that's all the pictures that you see are coming from the Pessamit River, and I will keep on talking of the Pessamit River for a reason, and that's a salmon river. Okay, and all these pictures have been taken downstream of the powerhouses. And downstream of the powerhouses, that was a salmon habitat from the sea, and 43.5 miles up in the river that was a prime salmon habitat. But Hydro Quebec, the way that Hydro Quebec is managing its reservoir, the water goes up and down from 5 feet each and every day, quite often 7 times a day, and all the time like that. Why? Because they produce peak energy for exportation. Okay, so and that's a point that which is very, very important related to the Northern Pass project. So everything is destroyed. The banks are collapsing in the river. Millions of tons, collapsing in the river. We made the trip. Is it a scoop? I will go with it. We made the trip 2 or 3 weeks ago with a gentleman from the New Hampshire Public Radio, and we took a boat from the sea and we went up 43.5 miles the river, and I could tell you that he took that was Sam Evans Brown, that someone could know. They took so much picture. They I couldn't say what he thought, but he realized that we were not liars. And we invite people to see. Our best argument is for the people to see what we are telling you. So basically, all the animals disappear from the devastated area. All the beaver, otter, mink, and so on, and impossible to go on these in the river in this condition. It's impossible. Yep. So again, we are focusing today, and as I've mentioned, there's 13 hydroelectric powerhouse on their territory. 11 reservoir. We are focusing only on one river, where the Pessamit River, because it's a salmon river. There's 2 powerhouses on that river, so it's a very small fraction of the problem that Pessamit have. So, and the problem is that they recognize, and that's the first time that they saw it, and it should be emotional for them. They recognize so many people that they knew. So basically, and I was mentioning before that the Pessamit are nomads by necessity, and the way that their way of life is that starting from the early fall, they go in the forest to hunt and trap and so on, and in the spring and the summer, they're back to the coast. And what is the reason for that? Since 8,000 years, what was the reason for them to get back to the coast? Salmon. Salmon was, and I'm saying was, the main source of food, for summer food, for them since 8,000 years. But there's no more salmon. The salmon on the Pessamit River is on the verge of extinction. Because of Hydro Quebec activities. So, and the elders, there are questions that have been asked to the elders, and they expressed that in a beautiful way since 2 days. They just said, we're not able anymore to transmit our culture to our kids, because there's no more land. We're not able to transmit our culture, the culture that we acquire from our ancestor, to our kids. As far as I'm concerned, it's devastating. So that's a little bit a resume of what I was saying. So they were working everywhere to install powerhouse before the Supreme Court of Canada decide that these people have rights. So that's what the river is looking like now. Look at the banks. Look at the trees floating. Look at the mud everywhere. That's a salmon habitat. That's the Pessamit River. That's a salmon habitat. So I didn't mention that before. We're focusing today on that river because it's a prime concern. It's a prime cultural concern for them. It's important for them to do something on behalf of their ancestors. It's important for them to do something on behalf of their kids. So that's why mainly we are here. So as I've mentioned, there was no impact assessment study, no compensation, I mean, they didn't ask Pessamit, they threw them out, and that was it. And the reservation, you see where is the arrow, and the Pessamit River is flowing from these massive reservoirs that you see on top to the Pessamit River, and the reservation is right there. So when Hydro Quebec and Quebec, not Hydro Quebec, that's the Quebec government who parked them by force on the reservation, at least the Innu thought that they will still be able to get their salmon. But it wasn't true. And the way that Hydro Quebec is managing the river, the stock of salmon is coming to extinction. And by doing so, Hydro Quebec and the Quebec government is breaching constitutional obligation and treaties. But they don't care. And you know why? They know that Pessamit doesn't have the money to sue them. As simple as that. They're poor people, and there's giant beside. So that's the key of the management of the Pessamit River. On the right-hand side, you could see the main dam, which is blocking the river. On the left-hand side, with the red arrow, you have the powerhouse. So basically, I don't know if you were able to notice, but the level of the reservoir is much higher than the powerhouse, and there's a tunnel taking the water from the reservoir going to the powerhouse to produce electricity. And there's 5 turbines in that powerhouse. So when people need electricity for where there's a very sudden and strong demand, they start the 5 turbines. An hour before, there could have been only one working. So they go from 2, 5, 3, random. I mean, it's like that all day, depending of the demand of electricity. What we've been told yesterday, and what was very interesting for us, apparently here in the United States, it's illegal to do that. You have to run on steady flow, and it's illegal to do that. But I mean, we also believe that it's immoral to do that. Immoral for the Pessamit people, and it's incredible to do that knowing that salmon is there, and knowing that that resource is on the verge of extinction. And as you know, the salmon population all over the globe is getting down, sharply down. And if we are not even able to protect, and they're doing more. They're destroying their habitat where they're hatching. So just to, these stats have been taken for 2 months, so they're really representative. So you could see that in a day, the water could go, the flow of water could go from roughly 9,000 cubic feet to 23,000 cubic feet. And it goes like that all the time, as you see. So the water goes up, down, up, down all the time, and there's no what the biologists are calling ecotones. I don't know if you're familiar with that. The vegetation which is making the transition between in between the water and the mainland. There are shrubs, there are herbs, plants, small plants, and so on. And these plants have many functions, I mean, for ecological function, but one very important function is to stabilize the banks. So when you go up and down like that, you destroy all that small vegetation, and it's that vegetation which holds everything together. So that's why you saw the banks crumbling down, and a huge bank, 100 feet, going down in the river, and it's happening all the time. So, in order to demonstrate that Hydro Quebec is producing with these powerhouse peak energy, look there. That's it's based on a day, and from the left, it's 1 o'clock in the morning, and till midnight at the right hand side. And as you could see, at 6, 7 o'clock. Everybody is cooking toast and bacon in Canada and the United States, and there's a very strong demand. So the 5 turbines are starting all together. Goes down in the afternoon, again dinner time, and during the night almost nothing. And the salmon is trying to survive in that. And that's what the Hydro Quebec is trying to sell here, green energy. So I did mention that. I will. These are stats, and I went over that. Here, one very important thing to know: what is the most sensitive life stage for salmon? It's from the time that they are laying the eggs, till the time that the eggs popped out of the gravel, okay? So on the Pessamit River, it's from roughly November 15, and the small fries are coming out of the gravel early June. All these blocks do represent how many, the water flow, okay? But keep your attention on the red one. And the red one, it means that the flow coming out of the turbine, it's roughly 4,600 cubic feet. And with 4,600 cubic feet, there's 22% of salmon nest. Salmon, how do you say that? Salmon nest? The eggs. No, the spawning sites, okay, that are dried up. So, and it's between November and June. So could you imagine in January and February when it's minus 40 there, what's happened to the eggs? 22% of the nest are dried up. Who cares of salmon? Quebec government, as shareholder of Hydro Quebec, Quebec government made a very, very clear choice for money. So these are the river banks that I was mentioning. These are very sensitive river banks made of clay, and without all the small bushes, that's the right thing, the bushes on near to the water that holds everything together, everything's crumbling down in the river. And what's happening when that silt and clay is going in the river, and you've seen that brownish water, and there was the clay that is floating. It's very long to settle clay, okay, in water. So basically, the salmon are laying their eggs in coarse gravel, and why? The reason is very simple: because the eggs could have access to a lot of oxygen of the water. When you put a layer of clay on that, you cut the excess of oxygen, and the eggs are dying, all the eggs. So some years we don't have one fry coming out of that river. So before the installation of the dam, on the far, the bottom line on the left-hand side, that's the year 1948. We do have stats from that year until 2016. We will have the information in the fall for 2017. They were able to catch roughly 1,000 to 1,200 salmon a year. And as I've mentioned before, that it was, I should say, the traditional food since 8,000 years. And now there's almost no salmon, 50, 60 salmon. Could you, is it possible to feed 4,000 people with 50 salmons? And that's why the elders are saying we're not able to transmit what we know, what we have been, what where parents showed us, what our ancestors brought to, and it's a clear cut from this generation to the new generation. The salmon is listed as an endangered species by the Canadian government. As I mentioned, the responsibility for fish in Quebec, you have a federal system too, so the central government is doing so and so, and the states are doing, but the fish, it's Quebec. And the fish is also responsible, the Quebec government is also responsible for the natural resource. So basically that's why he's the owner of Hydro Quebec. So he's responsible to protect the fish, and is responsible for Hydro Quebec. And according to the law, the Constitution of Hydro Quebec have to give 75% yearly of its profit to the Quebec government. So the Quebec government have made a very clear choice between their rights, the environment, and the money. There's an international convention, NASCO, that has been signed by all the northern countries of the hemisphere, European and including Canada and the United States. And clearly, without going through what is said there, Quebec and Hydro Quebec is infringing that convention. And the problem is that to sign an international convention, you need the federal government. And that's the Canadian government who signed that. And who is infringing the convention? The provincial government. And that's why we do have actually the very close collaboration of the federal government, which is not happy at all, not happy of their behavior. Another convention that have been signed by Canada and the United States, United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea, and the countries which did sign that convention have to take measure to protect the fish population, to enhance the quality of the habitat, and so on and so on and so on. And Hydro Quebec and the Quebec government is doing the contrary. They're destroying the habitat. United Nations Declaration of the Right of the Indigenous People, the Quebec government, as well as the Hydro Quebec, are infringing that international convention coming from the United Nations. And that's exactly why we are here, because we're telling them that since 50 years. Pessamit have been active in Quebec since 50 years, everywhere, public debates, public hearings. They went to the National Assembly. They gave a scientific report to the government, public hearing, and so on, with zero results. Why? Money talks. They don't care. So that's why we're here. We just want to tell the people of New Hampshire that the electricity that might run from the Northern Pass project, I mean, have the devastating impact on their way of life and on the environment, and the Basically, it's not rewarding for Hydro Quebec to sell base energy. Okay, at the border, the brokers here in the United States, I believe, could buy the base energy, let's say during the night at 3 o'clock in the morning, at roughly 4 cents a kilowatt hour. Okay, so it's not very rewarding. But when you're making your toast and bacon, as we do, they could sell that at 6, 7 in the morning at 14 cents. So they want to keep that powerhouse making peak energy. So I think that I've been quite clear. I did mention that according to the law of Hydro Quebec, they have to give back 75% of their profit to the Quebec government. Last year, 1.6 billion US, not Canadian, US billion, and to the Quebec government from Hydro Quebec. And it's like that year after year. So with such a gift, we believe that they are not too much concerned about their rights and the environment. And I was mentioning that the only way to have justice, or that's a possibility, is to go in court against the Quebec government and Hydro Quebec. But how could a community like Pessamit could go in court with such giants? They don't have the money to do that. It's difficult to survive. So, I mean, the Band Council could take the money to pay lawyers, as simple as that. They need the money for the direct service to the population. And as you could see, in Quebec, there's a socioeconomic indicator, and the base of that socioeconomic indicator is 0, which means that if you have making the mean of the socioeconomic factors of considered of the province, it's 0, and a more wealthy area or town could be at 2, 3. A less wealthy town could be at -1, -2. Who's the poorest of the poorest? Pessamit. They're at -8. No other community is like that in Quebec. Rate of unemployment, 7.2 in Quebec, 47.5 in Pessamit. They never got any compensation. They never got any chance to build businesses with money that might have been at least given to help them to make their living. Nothing. So basically they are poor, and I believe that the Quebec government wants them and like them to be poor. Adults on the social security programs, 7.4 in Quebec, 37 in Pessamit. Available income per capita in Quebec, roughly $27,000. In Pessamit, $1,200,000. And what's the most devastating result of that? They have a very, very young population. 50% is under 25 years old. And that young population is experiencing a suicide rate 5 times higher than the Canadian population. Why? Because the kids, they do see what they have done to their grandfather. They do see what their parents went through. And for the kids, seeing all that and listening at this story, which let them believe that they are second-class citizens, that's the result. And that's a clean energy that Hydro Quebec wants to sell here. Yep. So I did mention that briefly. The treaties that have been signed by Pessamit were respected till the middle of 1850 roughly, and after that the forest company came in and they start pushing them away. But the Pessamit people were able to survive because, I mean, their territory was so big that it was disturbing their activity. But when Hydro Quebec flooded everything, that was the end. So I didn't mention that. Pessamit have done everything possible on the internal basis in Quebec to try to convince the government that they have rights, and they failed. And we are here. And we are here because I was mentioning that before. The second language of the people from Pessamit is French. And these people are speaking very good French, as good as my French. And as you know, in Quebec, the government, the official language in Quebec is French. But even if we're speaking with very good French, and we have all the nuance possible in French, they don't understand us. They are hard of hearing. And when we're coming to United States with our bad English, it seems that people understand what we're saying. It's some kind of curious. So, what's the magnitude of the hydroelectric reservoir? So we're going to give you a picture. That's the magnitude of a Hydro Quebec reservoir. As you could see, the New York State, the Mass, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and all that circle do represent the surface area of all the reservoir of Hydro Quebec. And the black portion, which is roughly 29%, it's the portion of reservoir on the Pessamit Nitassinan, or on their traditional territory. Could you imagine all these towns, all these states being flooded? That's what we have. And believe it or not, in their 2016-2020 strategical plan, they are clearly saying, black on white, that during that strategical plan, they have to find another set of river to flood. I don't know, maybe in 20 to 30 years we won't have any more land there and we'll have to move to here, I don't know. So basically, because they will use these power stations that are designed to produce peak load energy, the Northern Pass project will accelerate the destruction of the Pessamit River, the destruction of the salmon, and that's why we want to share. And there's a lot of impact with the construction of a transmission line, and I do believe that people in New Hampshire knows the magnitude of this impact, and that you're doing very, very well in that regard. You're addressing the question very, very well, and we couldn't get into that debate. We're not home. But the message that we want to give, we want to tell you where the electricity is coming from. The electricity that will run in these lines for 50 years, where it's gonna come from. And very strangely, we did start coming in New Hampshire the first time. It was in September 2016. And what we saw on the website of, what's their name, Eversource, the very, very strange statements. And we will look at that. And it was on the website of Eversource. But since we're here, it disappeared. It faded out in the cyberspace. But we still do have the statement. So let's look at that. Hydro Quebec does not build an hydropower project unless it's favorably received by the communities. The company takes all the necessary steps to ensure that the host community, including Aboriginal communities, are involved. And we look at the dictionary because we're not that good in English, and we say, oh boy, involved, okay, in the development and benefit from economic spin-offs. Hydro Quebec endeavors to develop mutually beneficial partnership. Well, we look again in the dictionary and say, oh, that's not that. And then basically they're saying that they're the best Canadian company with the Aboriginal people. So let's go to the other slide. And go to the red. That's a gentleman from Hydro Quebec, which is making a very, very nice statement here. It's a myth, on the Concord Monitor, you know that newspaper. It's a myth to talk about displaced Native people in the context of Hydro Quebec project. Oh boy. We took again our dictionary and we said, well, we don't have the same opinion. And these gentlemen could tell you. Hydro Quebec and Aboriginal people have developed various partnerships and so on and so on and so on. I mean, it's crazy. They're saying anything. They're lying to the New Hampshire population. They're lying to the New England population. But we were not here. And they believe that we didn't have dictionary. So we do have a dictionary, and we look at that. So. The second statement, the Atlantic salmon has not been eliminated in Quebec's rivers as a result of a hydropower development. That's false. Second statement, the second line, federal law in Canada requires that no habitat for fish species be lost, and provincial legislation in Quebec ensures that appropriate measures are put into place to protect and enhance fish population. That's true. But they don't care. Okay, next one. So basically, that's a resolution that have been adopted by the Band Council, and which is summarizing what I've mentioned, that the neither Quebec government is taking consideration to their rights and the salmon and so on, and that the Northern Pass will accelerate the degradation and of the Pessamit River, and the salmon will disappear. And so the Pessamit and the Quebec government do have that, and they do have that presentation. But I mean, everything that is there is true, so we don't care. So Pessamit wants to have this right respected, and Pessamit want that Hydro Quebec and the Quebec government do respect their own set of laws, and also the federal laws. And the federal government is taking a good care of that now, and we could have very interesting news in the near future. Okay, next one. So, as I mentioned, Chief Simon was not able to attend, but that's his word. Our duty to have a remembrance to our ancestors and our moral obligation to give hope back to our children no longer allows us to accept the prevailing party's detrimental decision. And I did explain why he's thinking like that. That's Chief Ghislain Picard, and Chief Ghislain Picard came with us once in New Hampshire. He also came with us at Yale University when we were invited. And Chief Ghislain Picard is the chief responsible, the spokesperson for the 40 and so Native community in Quebec and Labrador. And that's what he's saying. Quebec and Hydro Quebec unlawfully appropriated a territory that was the heart of people's culture for thousands of years. They have ravaged the social harmony and rendered it destitute. The forced migration of the Pessamit Innu, the people from Pessamit, is a key piece of a cultural genocide, and that's what it is. So, Chinas Kumitan, that's one of the the only word that I know in Innu. These people are much better than me in that. If there's question, we will be more than glad to answer. And I'm inviting you to ask the question to these people, or if you could ask me the question, and I could refer to the good person, and they have much more knowledge than me on what they lived. Thank you very much.
And if you do have questions, please come up. And we have the local community TV here. Thank you, local TV. And we want to be able to capture your questions for them. So if you have a question, come on up and ask it from here.
Good evening, gentlemen. We appreciate your presence, and it's very disturbing to see what is happening to your nation. I have spent some time out at Standing Rock.
And we are translating, so allow the translator to translate. So,
Il dit bienvenue aux États-Unis. Welcome along with the rest of the this summit is you're moving a little bit too fast for me.
Yes. The number of people in your nation where you are living is about 4,000, and I believe is a total of 12,000 within the area that you described. How many of those people have degrees in law?
Degrees?
Law.
Lawyers.
Lawyers.
Yes. Roughly 5 to 10 lawyers.
Okay. Have you reached out to any of the other indigenous nations on both sides of the continent and within the United States? Because there are a number of lawyers who are willing to step up and help you.
Since to begin with, to start out, since they are doing this in a rather passive or peaceful way where they're educating people first and foremost about what is going on their territory, and then afterwards they will go to the other steps. But first of all, just educate the people.
I understand. As you are aware, for the first time in like 800 years, the 158 nations of the 500 nations in the United States have now got together. And I think it's time that we helped and reached out of the people who have taken from your nation to assist you.
okay. Excellent. Thank you.
Because the message they got from Native groups in Quebec and also New Hampshire is that they will band together. Because the more they have banded together, the stronger they'll be. So they've had very positive feedback on this trip with the different groups they've gotten together with.
Great. Thank you for the question. Do you have a question as well?
Bonsoir. I'm John Lewicki from Mason, and one of my questions is, of the damage that this does, how much is the intermittent flow, and how much, if it were just steady flow, would be improved?
He says if the flow became regular, as it was in the past, says that would protect the fish. And that's actually one of the things that's come out many times in these presentations over the last 2 days. You wouldn't get the devastation to the salmon fishery that they have at present, which is very unusual.
Okay. Thank you. I'll talk to somebody after about that.
Thank you for the question. There's another.
Hi, I'm Andrea Pierce. I live on the Seacoast, and thank you for coming tonight. My question is, now that all your native land has been destroyed by Hydro Quebec, what kind of things, what kind of skills can you teach your children and grandchildren as far as outside? You know, you can't hunt or fish anymore or trap. So, is there anything left? I mean, your whole culture is basically shot. So is there anything that you can teach your children, your outside skills?
Staff says with the territory that they still have, says they are working hard to find a way to teach the young people the skills of their elders. This generation here, which is the generation after the generation that experienced the forced removal from the land, is working hard to teach the next generation to find a way to do that. And it's not an easy thing, but there's still possibilities. If there are further inundations as they are planned for this whole area, it's going to make it that much more difficult because they already have a very rough road to this reculturation, and it will become that much more difficult if there is continued damage to their environment. They need the land in order to transmit these skills to the young people, because so much of their culture is land-based, land and subsistence-based for the animals, utilization of the fauna as well.
Excellent. Thank you for the question. We have another question.
Jean-Noël Lekana, 2 languages of colonizer, right? What's the best way young New Hampshire kids can support and spread their message while producing visibility and working with First Nation peoples?
One of the things is the young people have this especially good skills with social media. Because one of the things they can do is to spread the message on the social media, speak to their friends directly and through all the aspects of social media. And through that, you bring pressure on the government. I think a number of us here who fought the pipeline saw that we immediately organized on Facebook, and that was very effective. If we hadn't had the internet and ways to organize through Google groups and Facebook and whatever else, I don't think we would have been successful. That's a very good way. The young people had access and got very good at it.
And by the way, that presentation is available, fully available through the Sierra Club.
I have a follow-up question. Do you guys have a hashtag or a Twitter account that we can follow?
Hashtag, well, we are well.
Smoke signals. Smoke signals. These guys. Internet smoke signals, huh? Okay.
Facebook.
There is.
Yeah, it says there are links to their website, the Pessamit website. You got the Band Council, so you can access that. And of course, there's the whole link to this presentation. I'm sure there's going to be much more forthcoming.
Basically due to the fact that there's the language barrier, everything that we're doing in the United States, we post it in a website and it's pessamitsgreenenergy.com. So it's in English, and because we so everything that we're doing it's on that site, and they could give you the information. So it's in English, and all the press release and everything.
We will tweet it. And we will also have it available on Facebook and our website. That's something for me to do tomorrow. But I did want to highlight tomorrow is the site evaluation day, and actually the reason for their voyage. Tomorrow at the site evaluation committee, they've allowed for public input. And each party has 3 minutes to speak. They drove over 600 miles to come to speak for 3 minutes. They are a group, and they are representing their community. And I appreciate the long journey that you've taken to speak for those 3 minutes. And it means a lot. And we are all honored that you are here to speak this truth. And are there any other questions? Oh, we've got another one. Come on up. I think we have room for one more before they kick us out of the library. Thank you. I know, but we've got to clean it.
Hi, my name is Laura Lynch. I just want to know what the actual continent of Canada is doing, because Quebec is doing this to you. What are they doing to Quebec?
The Canadian government right now is doing an inquiry into the damage to the salmon fisheries, because that's a federal law. Because that's the only thing that's happening at this point. But that in itself.
You know, that money, they deserve that billions of dollars that Quebec is getting. Should be going to them. That's all I got to say.
You're right.
I failed to mention tomorrow's site evaluation committee meeting is public. It starts at 9 o'clock. It's in Concord in a funny location at, I believe it's 49 Donovan Street. It starts at 9 o'clock. Our guests here will be speaking within the first hour. And if you could come and support, I know it's during the day when most people have to work, but if you can come, that would be wonderful. I think for now, if Paul, if you'd like to speak, come up here, it'll be a lot easier. And adjust it.
I have probably quite a few things to say, and I don't really need to be that close. Our band, my name is Paul Pulio. I'm the Sagamore, or the speaker for the Grand Council of the Cossack Band, Pennacook and Abenaki people. We are a unrecognized federal entity in the United States. We represent a pre-constitutional tribe that has never relinquished any rights to the U.S. government, but we still are here. Concord does not recognize anything but a federally acknowledged tribe. So this whole process of Northern Pass, they've relegated us to a footnote in history that there was an indigenous group that was involved in the process. We're a footnote 5, I think, on some page. Now we've been in council with the Department of Energy's General Counsel. It's a dilemma because the state of New Hampshire does not want to recognize any indigenous rights in the state. Us, like the Pessamit, represent a very small group in a minority's minority. The only thing that they would let us speak to would be underground construction, because they potentially could dig up ancestral remains of the Pennacook and Abenaki in their process of putting this power line in. Anything else was off the table. It's interesting because all of the dams along the Connecticut are also being up for review right now for relicensing. Within these dams, there's a very strict flow control of the dams to prevent any more erosion or any destruction of the habitats for fish. Unfortunately, these dams are fish killers, and they have been since the early 1900s through now. The only time we can speak out is in partnership as stakeholders for fishing. They don't care about what happens to the river. The Pessamit, unfortunately, are being treated to a form of social and economic an environmental genocide against their people. What you haven't seen are maps that they have and their great plans for Hydro Quebec to almost totally inundate their lands, probably killing them all off in a generation or two. This is what it's all about. It's greed. They're planning to make this whole Pessamit territory one major ecological disaster that's got only one objective, is to make money for the province of Quebec, period. Nothing more. What we should be sending as a message for SEC, and by the way, the SEC has already denied us any intervening status. They deemed us right off the bat not to be eligible to speak for the SEC. Chief Renee Simon has asked me to speak on his behalf, and in 3 minutes you can hardly do any justice to this subject. What we need to do, one of the key things is Pessamit 2, is it?
Yeah,
Pessamit 2 is the one that's cycling the most and doing the most devastation. If that became a steady state, baseload unit, the fish may be having a chance to come back. That's almost, what, 50 miles of river?
43.5.
43. It may give the salmon half a chance to start spawning again. And what you're not hearing very clearly is salmon need a gravel base of steady, clean water to reproduce. And with all this silting action, their eggs are being destroyed and they can't go through their life cycle properly. This would give them at least some semblance of agriculture, fish culture to come back again. Our Connecticut is dead of salmon. And it's not because of the flow, it's because the dams aren't really allowing them to make the proper migrations. Let's not let this continue for them. They like the Abnaki, were four-season fishermen. We were really into the fish. We weren't into agriculture as much as people would like us to believe historically. We relied on fish. Fortunately, a lot of our rivers still run pretty good, and we still have plenty of fish supply. Luckily, I don't have to live off of it anymore. I can go to a grocery store. But if you look at them as 4,000 people living below poverty in a barren wasteland that's being destroyed by Hydro Quebec, we should be making a strong statement to our SEC about this. If we can't stop the transmission line, we should certainly make our Department of Energy know that they're being complicit with the province of Quebec and destroying the life and ways of these people. It's a sin. It's a moral obligation for our country to take a better route. Unfortunately, the greed for power in New England, and especially Southern New England needs it, is going to overwhelm anything that we do to speak against it. But if we at least could get them to run this one unit properly, it would give them some hope for their future. And it's a sad, it's really genocide in its worst form. It's institutional genocide being committed by Hydro Quebec and the province of Quebec supporting this type of endeavor. It's a sad statement for humanity. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think you can email the SEC if you can't get there.
Sure. Thank you. I was reminded kindly by my good friend that the Site Evaluation Committee also takes comments, and you can submit comments to them, and I can provide that information. I hope everyone here at least signed in, and we can provide you not only the presentation, but the additional information about the Site Evaluation Committee. And we can also provide that on our Facebook. Maybe we'll tweet it, and we'll have it on our website as well. But I do want to thank and honor our special guests here. And I also want to point out our wonderful volunteer translator. That's Henry Valancourt. Let's give him a round of applause. And our wonderful English speaker here as well. And all the volunteers who helped make this happen. I know a lot of people here have passed on the information. There were a ton of shares. We also have a video of Chief Simone on our Facebook page from when he last traveled here, explaining their position on Facebook. And we have the most Facebook views. It's over 6,000. Please share that. It's a really good statement from the chief. And and all of you, thank you for coming and taking this beautiful day in July to come and spend it in the basement of the library in Nashua with me. Thank you very much.